Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Dave and I've just finished doing some serious trenching work with my cheap Chinese mini digger, and it's time I think I gave it a little bit of love. In one of our previous videos I had a viewer, Adrian, who commented on could I please show the process of how to grease the mini digger. He's bought a similar model and just wants a bit of a run through on the process on how to do that. So I thought that'd be a good subject on today's video on how to grease your mini digger. I just wanted to start the video off by showing what my pins or the grease points look like before I've actually cleaned up the machine. So I've done about 30 hours, something like that, and normally I would wash the machine and pressure wash it and clean all these joints up before I put new grease in. But it's a good time, I think, to actually show what these look like after the use. And you can see in these particular shots that there is still grease in the joints. You can also see that there's a bit of a separation or a gap there, which is allowing a bit of movement in some of those joints as well. The top joints look quite clean still. You can see that the grease there is still nice and green and quite clean. Down the bottom of the stick, it's a bit of a different thing happening down there. Because the dirt and the dust gets attracted to the grease down the bottom, then a lot of the pins down the bottom of the stick seem to be quite covered in dirt, and you really sort of have to watch that, because that dirt can form almost a grinding paste if you leave it go too long, and it can severely wear the pin. So keep an idea on that, and particularly if you're going to grease any part of the boom and the stick, make sure you do down those bottom pins first. Okay, one of the first things I guess we should talk about on your Chinese mini digger are these types of grease fittings here. And on my particular mini digger I had a mixture of these type and then a normal or conventional type of fitting, and these ones are meant to be used with this spike type of greasing wand, and this came actually in my bag of goodies from the UHI people. That was included, and the idea is that this one here is you punch down the hole in the middle and put the fitting in there and squeeze away, and hopefully grease comes out. And I changed mine over because I don't have any other equipment on my place that actually has this type of fitting, and I thought I wanted to make them all consistently the same, and that's why I decided to change mine out to a regular fitting. There are some subscribers that watch. I know Dave is an avid watcher, and he likes these particular ones. He thinks they're much faster and quicker, and I can actually see the point there that I think they probably are. But to swap them over, all you need to do is just use a 10mm socket on the top there, and they will come out quite easily. And if you're going to get a replacement ones of these, then you've got to get obviously the same thread that's in there, and these are a 8mm thread and the pitch is 1.0, so they're all metric. And then I'm just going to replace it with a normal conventional type of fitting here, which just screws straight in. And there may be some places where you don't want to put a straight one in, that you want to put an angled or a 90-degree in, then you can do that as well. It's just a 10mm fitting on the top. Just do that, don't over tighten it, because you will strip it quite easily, and it's that easy to change. Now if you're in the market to buy a grease gun, you'll probably end up getting something similar to what this is, and this is just a cheap, I think it was $20 or something like that, from the local automotive store. And these ones take the cartridge that goes on the inside here. You just unscrew that outer casing, and I think it's a 450-gram cartridge that goes in there. And these certainly do the job, and I still use this one, although I have moved on to a slightly better design, which I'll show you shortly. These work okay. I don't like this one that's just got the single pump trigger on the outside, because you still have to hold the body with your other hand while you pump the handle, which makes it a little bit difficult at times. The other thing I don't like about this particular design is on my one, it actually starts to leak liquid out of the bottom of it when you store it for a while, and that's called grease bleeding. And what grease bleeding is all greases have a factor of oil separation where the oil separates from the thickener. And if you look at the spec sheet for a grease, it'll tell you what that oil separation factor is. And I know for a fact on my Agri grease that I use, it's a 2%, I think it is, separation. And what you'll find is if you put the grease gun down, you put it, say, on a bench or something like that, you'll come back after a couple of days and you'll find that there's a green liquid that's settled underneath of it that's actually leaked out of the grease gun. And I've been told that you can actually reduce that to a degree by depressurizing the grease gun after you've used it, take the pressure out of it, and it tends to stop that happening. Another thing you can do is when you store this, if you hang it on a wall and say it's vertically, that's the top, that's the bottom, you can actually get a storage system which is like a plastic cup that goes underneath here, and that'll catch any of that grease bleeding and keep it contained. But certainly these do the job. They're cheap, you can get them everywhere, and for a first grease gun they're probably just about ideal. Just show you what's on the inside of these cartridge guns, and so the outside just comes apart, and then on the inside is a cartridge, and in my case it was the Castrol Agri grease that I've been using for a while now. So this tube is 450 grams, you can see there, and you can get all sorts of different type grease, no matter what sort of brand you want to use. And just a word of warning for those people that really like John Deere products, they do sell tube grease, John Deere, but instead of being 450 grams, they are 395 grams, and they're slightly smaller tubes. And they make them that way that they will only fit into a John Deere grease gun. They sort of lock you into buying their particular grease gun if you like to use the John Deere product. So it's a bit of a trap, that one. I've known a few people that have bought the John Deere tubes and tried to fit them in a generic grease gun like this one, and they won't fit. This is the grease gun that I use. It's a McNaught Mini Lube system. I've had it now for a couple of years, and it's very good quality, and I like using it. One of the reasons is that it uses a 2.5 kilo tub on the bottom, so you're not actually having to swap out cartridges too often. I'm using a Castrol Agri grease, and it's really, this one is just a general purpose grease around the farm. You can use it on quite a few things, including pin bushings. If I was buying a grease just to grease the excavator pins, for example, I would probably go and buy a grease that had a moly component in it. This is a lithium complex grease, but it doesn't have any moly in it, and the moly just seems to work a bit better for anti-wear on pin bushings and so forth. But this is okay. I don't know if they're going to continue making this stuff, because I've actually found the last couple of times I've had to buy it that it's been a bit difficult to buy it, so maybe it's about to be replaced. Just a quick note now, you'll see there that it says that the grading on this grease is an NLGI 2, and what that is a rating on the, if you like, the thickness or the consistency of the grease. And I did see a table once where it compared the grading of grease to food material, which is a weird thing, but a NLGI 000 grading is about the equivalent of cooking oil. A number 2 grading, which is this one, is the normal grading for general purpose grease, and that's about the consistency of smooth peanut butter. And an NLGI number 6, which is the highest grading in grease, is the consistency of cheddar cheese. So I don't know what that has to do with the price of anything, but I did see that table once and thought that was quite interesting. Anyway, that's the grease gun that I use. It's quite good, but I'm not going to get into an argument about which grease you should be using, because everybody has their own opinion, and I would just suggest whatever works for you is best. Just to have a look at the different tips that I use on my grease gun, on the right hand side over here is the standard fitting, and this is typical of what will come with most grease guns. The one in the middle is the Seika quick coupler grease gun connector, and that was courtesy of Everyday With Me Nick in the UK. He sent that over to me. And the one on the left hand side here is a Lock and Lube quick connect coupler, and the difference between these two is these two work very similar, but when I looked at this one, and in the video, if you want to go back and have a look at the review on this, I mentioned that the front face of this coupler was a bit too large for some of the areas in my mini digger that has the metal shroud around the fitting, and this was just a little bit too big to fit in there. The lock and lube one you can see on the end here is just a little bit smaller on the front here compared to that one, and I find that this one works for the majority of the areas on the mini digger. There is still a couple of points where this still doesn't work, and I have to go back and put this one on. This lock and lube attachment for the front of the grease gun is quite small here, but I have noticed on my Chinese mini digger even there are a couple that it doesn't fit into. And if you look at this one here, you can actually see that the shroud around the grease fitting here has actually been tack welded on, but it's off center, and even my lock and lube one doesn't fit in there properly. So in those situations, what I do is I just go back to my original grease gun fitting, which is typical of what everybody has on their grease gun, and this one will actually fit in there quite well. So in that situation, all I do is just spin it back onto my grease gun, and then I can put that in there, and hopefully I can get some grease in. And you can see it's coming out the side now. So I have a couple of these on the mini digger that are like that, I've got to swap it over and put my original tip back on again. Now if you're using the standard grease gun fitting, which is like this one, the outer tip here is adjustable, and that adjusts how much bite you get around the back of the grease fitting here. If it's way too loose and you put it on, sometimes you'll get grease actually coming out the bottom and it's not actually going through into the actual joint. If you have it too tight, say I'm adjusting up here, then once you put it on, you can't actually get it off. So you have to come with a happy sort of medium here where it's loose enough that you can get it on and off, so it sort of clicks on and comes off okay. And then if it's sitting on properly, you can just give it a couple of squeezes and you'll see the grease is coming out and you can take the gun off. Just to keep track of the joints that I've actually greased, what I do is I just leave it looking like this, so you can see that the grease has actually started to come out the sides here. I don't bother cleaning that off or anything, and that tells me that this joint, I've actually done this one. Now this particular grease fitting or zerk fitting here is controls the swing boom on my digger, and that ram actually makes the swing boom move around. And this is the one that I found on my digger that's always the hardest to get grease into, and I think it's because it's just in a position where the pin is pressing against where the grease hole is on the inside, and sometimes I found it really hard to get grease in there. So what I've done a few times is I've just extended the ram in and out just to change the position of it, and sometimes I can get grease in it. If it's really hard and I can't get any grease in it, what I'll do is I'll actually get onto this bolt here, take this bolt out and then knock the pin out and then clean it up and grease it and then put it back in. It's only a 5-minute job. Okay, if you do have a swing boom on the front of your machine, then along the side here you'll see that there's a hole in here and there's a grease fitting point in there as well, and that's to the back of this ram here that drives the swing boom, so you'll need to make sure not to miss that one. If your digger has the swing boom on it, then you're going to have 2 grease fittings here and here that lubricate the housing here. And don't forget about these two that are in here. So these grease up the swivel plate that allow the machine to spin around, and it's very important that you keep these greased, and you put one pump of grease in each hole, and then you rotate the house 90 degrees and then give it another pump. Now on the bottom of the ram that controls the boom up and down is I have this grease nipple here, and I've replaced this one with a right angle or a 90 degree fitting. It just makes it a bit easier for me to get in with the grease gun. But the worst one on the whole digger is the one that's up the back, up here. And you can just see it in here. If I point out here, it's up in there. And that's the reason that that's so difficult is because it's right in a spot where it's directly behind this ram, and you can't actually get into it at all. It's right behind there. If I had a 90 degree fitting, maybe I could get in there and do it. But today what I'm actually going to do is swap this one out and put an angled one in there. Now, the crazy thing about this particular fitting is that it is smaller than every other fitting on the digger. This particular one is the only one that I found that is an M6 mil or a metric 6mm thread. The only one. Okay, I've just swapped that over to a 45 and I'll see whether that's going to work. That's great. Now there is one right at the end of the stick here, and sometimes it's hard to get to. You actually have to tilt the bucket all the way up to get access to that one. So that's fine. In the bucket itself then, don't lubricate any of these pins here. They'll just get full of dirt and then start grinding away, which isn't a good thing. So there we are. That's today's video on how to grease your mini digger. I hope, Adrian, if you're watching, that you've learned something from that and that you feel a bit more confident about being able to do the process yourself. Thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate everybody's support in watching the video, so please share, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.